The council chamber smelled like fear. Curix noticed it first, the chemical signals his antennae picked up from the other leaders. They sat in their designated sections, each species separated by reinforced barriers that once seemed like diplomatic courtesy, but now felt like necessary protection. The Luminar representative glowed dimmer than usual, her crystalline body pulsing with nervous light patterns. The amphibious Tide Empire delegate kept his gills fluttering rapidly, a sign of anxiety his kind could not hide. 15 years of war had brought them to this moment. 15 years of watching human fleets tear through their combined defenses like they were made of paper. The holographic display in the center showed the current military positions, and the map was drowning in red markers. Human forces surrounded every major world that mattered. 3 weeks ago, they had broken through the Scale Authority's legendary defensive line at Sarn. 2 weeks ago, human carriers appeared in orbit above the Hive Collective's industrial centers. Yesterday, reconnaissance confirmed human strike groups within range of all 5 homeworlds simultaneously. The doors opened without warning. No ceremony, no announcement, no diplomatic fanfare. 2 humans walked in wearing simple gray suits that somehow looked more intimidating than any military uniform. The woman walked with the confidence of someone who knew she held all the advantages. The man beside her carried a tablet, and nothing else. No weapons, no guards, no pretense. David Ross stopped 3 meters from the council table. He did not bow. He did not greet them with the traditional phrases of diplomatic respect. He simply looked at each leader in turn, his eyes measuring them the way a doctor might examine a disease. Curix activated his translator and tried to control his voice. Ambassador Ross, we welcome you to these negotiations. The Council has prepared terms that we believe will satisfy all parties and end this unfortunate conflict. Show me, David said. His voice carried no emotion, no anger, no triumph, just a flat statement of command. The holographic display shifted to show the proposed treaty. Human forces would return to their original 40 systems. All sides would retreat to pre-war borders. A mutual non-aggression pact would be signed. War reparations would be split equally among all parties. The document used words like misunderstanding and regrettable escalation to describe what happened. Admiral Rebecca Hayes, the woman beside David, laughed once. It was not a pleasant sound. David touched his tablet. The treaty document vanished, replaced by a new set of images. Communications logs appeared first, dated 5 years before the war began. Council members discussing the human problem in private channels. Strategic assessments that described humanity's growing colony network as an acceptable target for preventive action. Military planning documents that outlined strike patterns designed to hit civilian population centers first to break human morale quickly. The council chamber went silent, except for the hum of environmental systems. This one is interesting, David said, zooming in on a particular message. Curix, you wrote this personally. I will translate for everyone to understand clearly. You said, the humans breed too fast and claim too many worlds. If we wait another decade, removing them will cost too much. Better to solve this now while we still can. Curix's antennae flattened against his head. Around the table, the other leaders shifted uncomfortably. The Luminar delegate's light flickered like a candle in wind. Rebecca activated another display. These are recordings from your military channels during the first strikes. You celebrated. You called it the solution to peace. You estimated humanity would be extinct within 2 years. That was tactical assessment, the Scale Authority delegate hissed, his forked tongue flickering nervously. Not policy. You attacked 18 colony worlds in the first week, David replied. 40 million civilians died before our fleets could respond. You targeted schools, hospitals, residential districts. Your tactical assessment included the phrase complete biological removal of the species. I am curious what you think that means if not genocide. The Tide Empire delegate raised one webbed hand. The Council regrets the excessive measures taken in the opening phase. That is why we are offering these generous peace terms now. We can move past this and establish proper diplomatic relations going forward. David closed his tablet. The click of it shutting echoed in the chamber. You attacked us because you thought we were weak. You saw that we value individual lives, that we hesitate before violence, that we try diplomacy first. You interpreted our restraint as inability. You believed our compassion made us vulnerable. He stepped closer to the council table. None of the delegates moved to stop him. You were wrong. Our restraint was not weakness. It was choice. We chose not to act like you. We chose to build instead of conquer, to trade instead of steal, to negotiate instead of attack. You mistook that choice for incapacity. Rebecca brought up new displays showing industrial output from human space. The numbers were staggering. 300 warships per month rolling out of automated shipyards. Weapons production that exceeded all 5 coalition species combined. Supply networks that could sustain military operations indefinitely. Here are our terms, David said. Unconditional surrender within 72 hours. Complete demilitarization of your core systems. Human military governors will be installed on each homeworld. Your existing governments will be dissolved. War crime tribunals will be established for everyone who planned and executed the attack on our colonies. These terms are not negotiable. Kurik stood up, his multiple legs trembling. You cannot seriously expect us to accept this. We are offering you peace. Take it before we are forced to commit our full military strength. Rebecca smiled without humor. Your full strength was committed 8 months ago at the Battle of Proxima. We destroyed it. The fleets surrounding your homeworlds right now could turn your cities to glass within hours. We choose not to because we are not you. We do not murder civilians for convenience. David turned to leave. 72 hours. Surrender or face complete military occupation. Those are your choices. Choose wisely. The two humans walked out. The doors closed behind them with a soft hiss. In the council chamber, 5 species sat in stunned silence, realizing they had not invited ambassadors to negotiate peace. They had been summoned to hear the terms of their defeat. Curix looked at the countdown timer that appeared on the main display. 72 hours. He whispered to himself in his native language, words that translated roughly to, "What have we awakened?" 68 hours had passed. The deadline came and went without response from the council. General Alex Porter stood in the tactical command center of the UES Retribution, watching the synchronized countdown reach 0 across all 5 target zones. Around him, communication officers relayed final status checks from fleet commanders positioned at each homeworld. Every ship reported ready. Every weapon system showed green. Every soldier knew their mission. Alex had fought in the first battle of the war, 15 years ago at New Melbourne Colony. He remembered pulling children from burning buildings while orbital bombardment continued overhead. He remembered the smell. War had that effect on people. It burned memories into your brain that never quite faded. All fleets confirm ready status, his tactical officer reported. Awaiting your order, sir. Alex nodded once. Execute Operation Reckoning. All theaters, full engagement. Rules of engagement remain in effect. Military targets only. Civilian infrastructure is not to be damaged unless it poses direct threat to our forces. Across 5 star systems, human fleets moved as one. Ships that had been holding position suddenly accelerated toward their objectives. The Scale Authority homeworld of Sarn detected the incoming forces first. Their planetary defense network activated immediately, filling orbital space with plasma charges and kinetic interceptors. The defenses had been considered the finest in known space, upgraded continuously over 3 centuries of military development. They lasted 11 minutes. Human ships used adaptive shielding that analyzed incoming fire and adjusted frequency responses in real time. The plasma charges that should have melted through armor plating simply splashed against energy barriers and dissipated. Kinetic rounds that should have punched through hulls struck shields, calibrated to their exact velocity and mass. The Scale Authority defenders watched their most powerful weapons accomplish nothing. Return fire was efficient and devastating. Human railguns targeted defense platforms with mathematical precision. Each shot struck power generators or ammunition stores, causing the platforms to tear themselves apart from internal explosions. In 30 minutes, Sarn's orbital defense network ceased to exist. General Alex ordered the second wave. Dropships launched from carriers, thousands of them forming organized patterns as they entered atmosphere. The reptilian military on Sarn scrambled their ground forces, expecting a traditional invasion. Armor divisions rolled toward predicted landing zones. Artillery batteries prepared to pound human positions. Air superiority fighters launched to contest the skis. They found themselves fighting an entirely different kind of war. Human forces did not land in massive concentrations. They deployed in small, highly mobile units that moved with purpose toward specific targets. Military command centers found themselves surrounded before they realized the enemy had landed. Weapons factories discovered human soldiers already inside, disabling production equipment without destroying the buildings. Ammunition depots were secured, not exploded. Supply routes were cut, not bombed. A reptilian general named Voss commanded the defense of Sarn's capital city. He watched tactical displays showing human units bypassing civilian centers entirely. They moved around hospitals, schools, residential districts. One human squad actually stopped their advance to help evacuate a civilian shelter that was in danger from a chemical fire started by stray munitions. Voss had never seen an enemy behave this way. He tried to use civilians as cover, positioning artillery in residential districts. Human forces simply waited. They surrounded the positions, cut off supplies, and broadcast messages telling the reptilian soldiers they could surrender without shame. After 3 days without food or ammunition resupply, the artillery crews gave up. Not one civilian building had been damaged in the siege. Across the other homeworlds, similar patterns emerged. The Luminar Commonwealth's crystalline cities remained intact even as their military installations fell. The Tide Empire's underwater strongholds were breached by human submarines using sonar technology the amphibious forces could not counter. The Sky Dominion's aerial fortresses were pulled from the sky by targeted electromagnetic pulses that disabled their anti-gravity generators without harming the avian crews inside. The Hive Collective's command nodes were captured by specialists trained in their unique communication methods. 3 months after the invasion began, all 5 coalition species had surrendered completely. The speed of collapse shocked everyone, including many humans. What was supposed to be a grinding campaign of years had taken 1 season. Admiral Rebecca Hayes reviewed the final casualty reports with grim satisfaction. Human military deaths, 12,000. Coalition military deaths, 200,000. Civilian casualties on both sides, fewer than 5,000, mostly from accidents and incidents of friendly fire. They never understood, Rebecca said to her intelligence chief during the debrief. They thought war was about destruction. We learned it is about precision. They wanted to erase us. We just wanted to make sure they could never try again. The hardest part came next. Human military governors arrived on each homeworld with detailed instructions. The occupation would not be brief. Entire governmental systems needed to be dismantled and rebuilt. Weapons production had to be monitored and controlled. Most critically, the populations needed to understand why this had happened and why it could never happen again. Governor Linda Park landed on Sarn 1 week after the surrender. She was a civilian administrator, not a soldier, chosen specifically because her background was in education and social development. She walked through the capital city and saw reptilian citizens watching her with expressions that mixed fear, resentment, and confusion. They had been told humans were soft, weak, unable to fight seriously. Now human soldiers stood on every corner, human ships filled their sky, and human authority superseded their own leaders. Linda's first official act was to reopen the schools that had been closed during the fighting. Her second act was to mandate new curriculum. Every student, regardless of age, would learn human history. They would study Earth's wars, its genocides, its recovery. They would understand exactly what kind of species had defeated them and why humans fought the way they did. She stood in front of Sarn's Grand Assembly Hall, now converted to administrative headquarters, and read her prepared statement to the gathered media. "We did not come here to destroy you. We came here to survive. You tried to erase humanity from the galaxy. We responded by ensuring you will never forget we exist. This occupation will last as long as necessary. You will learn. You will change. And when you are ready, you will join us not as conquered subjects, but as equals who understand why attacking peaceful neighbors is a mistake you make only once." The broadcast went to all 5 homeworlds. Billions watched. The message was clear and simple. Retribution had come, but it wore the face of a teacher, not an executioner. The real punishment was not death or destruction. It was being forced to understand exactly what you had done and living with that knowledge forever. The classroom fell silent as the screen showed images from Earth's past. Young reptilian students sat at their desks, watching footage of cities reduced to rubble by atomic weapons. The documentary did not spare details. It showed the shadows burned into concrete where people had stood when the flash came. It showed hospitals overwhelmed with radiation victims. It showed the slow death of ecosystems poisoned by fallout. Robert Grant paused the video and turned to face his students. He was one of 300 human teachers assigned to Sarn's education system, part of Governor Park's Understanding Initiative. His classroom held 45 students ranging from adolescent to young adult. All of them had grown up being told humans were weak, emotional, unsuited for military power. Now they watched evidence of humanity destroying itself with weapons their own species had not yet invented. A student named Vess raised her scaled hand. "Teacher Grant, if humans nearly made themselves extinct, how did you survive to conquer us?" Robert smiled sadly. "That is the lesson you need to understand, Vess. We did not conquer you because we are naturally violent. We conquered you because we learned from violence. Earth fought wars for thousands of years. We got very good at it, but we also got very tired of it." He advanced the presentation to show images of Earth today. Green cities built around restored ecosystems. Fusion reactors powering civilizations without pollution. Orbital habitats where millions lived in comfort. Medical technology that had eliminated most diseases. Educational systems that reached every child regardless of location or wealth. "We learned that survival requires 2 things," Robert continued. "The ability to defend yourself when attacked, and the wisdom to build instead of destroy when given the choice. Your leaders saw our building and mistook it for weakness. They never considered that species which survived learning to build also survived learning to fight." Another student spoke up without raising her hand, something that would have earned punishment under the old educational system. "But you killed millions of our soldiers. You occupied our worlds. How is that different from what you say we tried to do?" "Good question," Robert said, meaning it. Critical thinking was exactly what the curriculum aimed to develop. "The difference is in what we did after we won. Show me one civilian neighborhood we destroyed. Show me one hospital we bombed. Show me one school we targeted. We could have done all of that. Our weapons were capable. We chose not to." He pulled up casualty statistics on the screen. Coalition military deaths versus civilian deaths. The ratio was stark. For every 100 soldiers killed in combat, fewer than 3 civilians died, usually from accidents. The students had all heard stories from their families about how carefully the human forces had fought. It was one thing to hear stories. It was another to see the mathematics of restraint. On the Hive collective homeworld, a different kind of education was happening. Governor James Wright walked through the massive underground chambers where worker drones spent their lives serving the collective. The hive species communicated through chemical signals and shared thoughts. A true hive mind where individual identity barely existed, or it had barely existed. That was changing. A worker drone approached Wright with jerky, uncertain movements. The drone had requested this meeting through the new individual communication system humans had installed. Each drone now wore a translator device that allowed them to express thoughts as distinct individuals rather than as parts of the collective whole. Governor Wright, the drone said, its voice synthesized by the translator. I have chosen a name. The collective says this is wrong. I do not wish to be only Worker Unit 7 of Chamber 42. I wish to be called Solo. Wright nodded seriously. Solo is a good name. It means you stand as yourself. The Queens are upset about this development. The Queens say individuality will destroy the collective. They say we will become weak and divided like other species. The Queens are afraid, Wright replied. They have ruled through absolute control for millennia. They cannot imagine their workers thinking independently, but I want to show you something, Solo. Wright led the drone to a construction site where human engineers worked alongside hive workers on a new medical facility. Before the occupation, such projects took years of careful coordination through the Queen's commands. Now, individual drones proposed solutions, debated approaches, and implemented changes without waiting for approval from above. The building was being completed in one-third the expected time. Watch how they work, Wright said. Those drones are individuals now, but they still cooperate. Individuality does not mean abandoning the group. It means contributing your unique perspective to make the group stronger. Your hive will not fall apart. It will become more than it was. Solo watched the workers for a long time. Then he said something Wright had never heard from a drone before. I want to help build something, not because the Queen commands it, but because I choose to. On Luminar Commonwealth worlds, crystalline beings struggled with a different kind of lesson. Their species experienced emotions as light frequencies, everything visible to everyone around them. They had no concept of hiding feelings or lying about reactions. When human teachers showed them footage of human wars, the Luminar students literally glowed with horror and grief. A young crystalline named Lux attended philosophy classes taught by a human professor named Diana Foster. The class discussion focused on ethical frameworks for warfare. Lux had been raised believing that advanced species did not engage in war, that violence was a sign of evolutionary failure. Learning that humans had committed terrible atrocities against each other, then learned to stop, then been forced to fight again when attacked, created a cognitive conflict her species had never navigated before. Professor Foster, Lux said, her body pulsing with confused orange light, if humans know war is wrong, how can you justify what you did to us? We do not justify it, Diana replied. We accept it as necessary. Your council planned our genocide. They struck first, targeted civilians, and intended to erase us completely. We had three choices: die as a species, surrender and hope for mercy from people who showed none, or fight back with everything we had. We chose survival. But the occupation, the military governors, the forced education system, is to make sure it never happens again, Diana interrupted gently. Lux, we could have destroyed your cities. We could have bombed your worlds until they were uninhabitable. We could have done to you exactly what you tried to do to us. Instead, we are teaching you. Yes, we are forcing you to learn, but we are not forcing you to die. Lux's light shifted to a deep blue, the color of profound thought. So you chose to be teachers instead of executioners. We chose to be survivors, Diana corrected. Teaching you is how we ensure our children do not have to fight this war again in 50 years. Across all 5 occupied worlds, similar conversations happen daily. Millions of students learned about human history, human values, human mistakes, and human resilience. The curriculum was mandatory, the attendance enforced, the lessons uncomfortable. Coalition citizens complained about cultural imperialism, about forced indoctrination, about losing their identity. Governor Park addressed these concerns in a public broadcast. You tried to erase our culture by killing everyone who carried it. We are preserving your culture by teaching you why genocide is wrong. If you find that exchange unfair, consider what fairness would have looked like if you had won. The broadcast ended with footage of human colonies before the war. Children playing, markets bustling, ships arriving with goods and leaving with products, normal life that had been shattered by an unprovoked attack. The final image showed a memorial wall with 40 million names carved into black stone, every human who died in the first week of the war. The message needed no words. 5 years had passed since the occupation began. The Tide Empire's capital city of Deepcurrent sprawled across the ocean floor, a marvel of bioluminescent architecture and flowing water channels. Captain Daniel Foster walked through the transparent corridors wearing an environmental suit, accompanied by his unlikely companion, a former resistance leader named Oros. The amphibious being swam alongside the walking human, his webbed hands gesturing as he spoke. You still have not answered my question, Captain. Why did your forces spare the civilian processing centers during the invasion? They were legitimate military targets. We stored weapons there, used them for communications. By your own rules of engagement, you could have destroyed them. Daniel stopped walking and turned to face Oros through the clear corridor wall. The amphibian floated in the water just beyond, his gills pumping steadily. Because 3,000 civilians worked in those facilities. Yes, they processed military materials. They also processed food, medicine, and basic goods. Destroying them would have created a humanitarian crisis that would have killed more civilians than soldiers. That makes no strategic sense, Oros insisted. In war, you exploit every advantage. In war for conquest, yes, Daniel replied. We were not conquering you, we were stopping you. There is a difference. They continued walking until they reached a construction site where human engineers worked alongside Tide Empire workers to rebuild a water purification facility damaged during the fighting. The project was months ahead of schedule because both species contributed their unique expertise. Humans understood advanced materials and power systems. The Tide Empire knew water chemistry and flow dynamics better than any species in the galaxy. My grandfather fought in the Beijing bombardment, Daniel said quietly. I was 10 years old when it happened. The enemy coalition targeted civilian centers to break our will to fight. They killed my grandmother, my aunt, my 2 cousins. I remember my grandfather at the memorial service. He was a gentle man, a teacher before the war. He stood at the grave and said something I have never forgotten. Oros floated closer to the corridor wall, listening intently. He said vengeance and justice are not the same thing. Vengeance is hurting someone because they hurt you. Justice is stopping them from hurting anyone again. He said if we just hurt them back, we become what they are. But if we stop them and teach them, we become what we should be. So this occupation is justice, Oros asked. This occupation is making sure your leaders never again decide that exterminating a peaceful species is acceptable policy. Yes, we are changing your government. Yes, we are monitoring your military. Yes, we are teaching your children, because the alternative is leaving you as you were, waiting for you to rebuild and try again. Oros was silent for a long moment. Then he said something that Daniel had been waiting years to hear. I understand now why you fight the way you do. You are not trying to destroy us. You are trying to fix us. We are trying to survive, Daniel corrected gently. Fixing you is just the method that lets both our species live. On the Hive collective homeworld, Solo had become something unprecedented in his species' history. The former worker drone now led a council of drones who had embraced individuality. They met weekly to discuss improvements to collective efficiency, proposals for new construction, and debates about the future of their society. The queens refused to attend these meetings, calling them rebellious and dangerous. Governor Wright sat in on the latest council session. 67 individual drones filled the chamber, each wearing their translator device, each ready to contribute their unique perspective. The topic was healthcare reform. The traditional hive system treated drones as replaceable units. Injured drones were simply left to die while new ones were bred to replace them. The individual drones wanted to change that. Solo presented the proposal. We have studied human medicine. They spend significant resources keeping damaged individuals alive. This seems inefficient, but the humans claim it strengthens their society. We wish to implement similar systems for drones who are injured but can be repaired. A Queen's representative, a specialized drone designed for communication, responded with chemical signals translated to words. This is waste. Injured drones cannot work at full capacity. Resources spent healing them could create new drones instead. But the healed drones have experience, another individual named Spark argued. They have learned skills over years of work. A new drone must learn everything from the beginning. Healing the injured is more efficient long-term than constant replacement. The debate continued for hours. Governor Wright said nothing, just watched as drones argued, considered, changed positions, and eventually reached a consensus. They voted to implement a trial healthcare program for injured workers. The Queens would hate it, but the drones now had enough collective will to push it through. After the meeting, Solo approached Wright. "Governor, may I ask a question about human society?" "Of course." "When individual humans disagree, how do you prevent violence?" In the hive, the Queen's decision was absolute. Now we have many voices, many ideas. What stops us from fighting each other? Wright smiled. "That is the most important question you have asked, Solo. The answer is systems. Humans created laws, courts, voting, debate formats. We built structures that turn disagreement into progress instead of conflict. You will need to do the same. The individual voice is powerful, but it must be channeled through systems that produce decisions everyone can accept, even if they disagree with the decision. Especially then, democracy is not about everyone getting what they want. It is about everyone accepting that their voice was heard and the decision was made fairly. You do not have to copy our system. You need to create one that works for your species. But yes, you need systems." Solo's antennae twitched in a pattern Wright had learned meant deep thought. "This is more complicated than I imagined. Being individual is easy. Being individuals together is hard." "That," Wright said, "is the most human thing you have ever said." On Sarn, Governor Park reviewed economic reports with growing satisfaction. The Scale Authority's economy had not just recovered from the war. It was growing faster than before. Factories converted from weapons production now manufactured consumer goods, construction equipment, and medical devices. Trade agreements with human systems brought in new technologies and opened new markets. Living standards were measurably higher than they had been under the old government. Not everyone was happy about it. Park knew that. She received daily complaints from former officials who resented being sidelined. She read manifestos from traditionalists who claimed human occupation was destroying reptilian culture. She monitored resistance groups who still believed armed rebellion could drive the humans out. But she also read the polling data. 72% of reptilians now said life was better under human administration than it had been before. Among young people, that number reached 86%. They had jobs, education, healthcare, and futures that did not depend on military service or absolute obedience to religious authorities. Park met with Vess, the young student who had asked the hard questions in class years ago. She was grown now, working as a journalist covering the occupation. She came to interview Park about plans for transitioning power back to local governance. "Governor, when will you leave?" Vess asked directly. "When you are ready for us to leave," Park replied. "When your democratic institutions are strong enough to resist backsliding into authoritarianism. When your military is restructured to defend rather than conquer. When your educational system produces citizens who think critically instead of following orders blindly. Maybe in 5 more years. Maybe longer. Some people say you will never leave. That this is permanent conquest disguised as temporary occupation." Park looked at the young reptilian seriously. "Vess, we do not want to stay forever. Occupying 5 different species across dozens of worlds is exhausting and expensive. We would love to go home, but we will not leave you in a position where you can rebuild your military and try this again. We lost 40 million people to your first attempt. We will not give you a second." Vess wrote that down. Then she asked the question she had come to ask. Was it worth it? The war, the occupation, everything. Could we not have found peace another way? "Your leaders declared war on us 5 years before they fired the first shot," Park said tiredly. "They planned our genocide in detail. They attacked our colonies without warning or declaration. They targeted civilians deliberately. Could we have found peace with people like that? No. We could have died quietly or we could have survived loudly. We chose survival. Everything that came after was just the price of that choice." The playground looked like something from a dream that neither species could have imagined 15 years ago. Human children played alongside young reptilians, crystalline juveniles, amphibious spawn, avian chicks, and hive drones who had been born into individuality. They played a game that had no name yet, something they invented together that combined rules from 6 different species. Nobody was quite sure who was winning, but everyone seemed to be having fun. Amy Chen sat on a bench watching her daughter play. Beside her sat Buzz, the first hive drone to take a name, now old enough that his exoskeleton showed gray patches. They had met during the early occupation years, when Amy was a junior translator and Buzz was learning to be himself. Now they were both parents watching their children navigate a galaxy their own parents could never have predicted. "Your daughter is very good at climbing," Buzz observed. "She reached the top structure faster than my son." "Your son is better at the puzzle sections," Amy replied. "He solved that crystal maze in half the time." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Buzz said, "Do you ever wish it had happened differently? The war, I mean." Amy considered the question carefully. "I wish it had not been necessary, but I cannot wish it had not happened because then all of this would not exist. My daughter would not have friends from 5 different species. Your son would not exist as an individual. The galaxy would still be 5 separate powers living in fear and suspicion of each other." "The Queens still do not approve of individuality," Buzz said quietly. "They say I am a mistake, that my son and others like him represent the end of our species." "What do you say?" "I say they are wrong. Our hive is stronger now, more creative, more adaptable. But they cannot see it because it requires admitting they were wrong about everything." A reptilian child fell from a climbing structure. Amy and Buzz both stood automatically, but before they could move, 2 other children had already helped their friend up. One human girl checked for injuries while a young avian used his wing to dust off the reptilian scales. The hurt child thanked them and went back to playing. "That," Amy said, sitting back down, "is why it was worth it." General Alex Porter was dying. At 83 years old, his body was finally giving up after decades of military service. He lay in a hospital bed on Earth, watching news broadcasts from across the galaxy. The occupation was scheduled to end officially in 6 months. Transition governments were being established on all 5 former coalition homeworlds. Human advisors would remain, but direct military governance would cease. A visitor arrived that Porter had not expected. Voss, the reptilian general who had defended Sarn during the invasion, now wore the uniform of the planet's new defense force. He had requested permission to visit Porter before the human general died. Porter agreed, curious about what his former enemy wanted to say. General Porter, Voss said, speaking through a translator device, I have come to thank you. Porter raised an eyebrow. Thank me for defeating you. Thank you for not destroying us when you could have, Voss replied. I commanded the defense of Sarn. I watched your forces systematically dismantle our military while carefully avoiding civilian casualties. I watched you surround my artillery positions and wait instead of bombing them when I placed them in civilian districts. At the time, I thought you were weak. I was wrong. Porter gestured for Voss to sit. You were following orders, so was I. The difference was in what our orders said. I have spent 10 years studying human military history, Voss continued. I teach it now at our war college. I tell my students about wars fought on Earth, about how humans learn to balance force with restraint. I tell them that real strength is not in the ability to destroy, but in the wisdom to know when destruction is necessary and when it is not. Are they listening? The young ones are. They grew up under occupation. They learned from human teachers. They see the galaxy differently than my generation did. Voss paused, then said something that clearly cost him emotional effort. You broke us, but you rebuilt us better than we were. I am not certain we deserve that mercy. Mercy had nothing to do with it, Porter said bluntly. We did not spare you because we are kind. We spared you because destroying you would have made us the monsters you believed we were. We fought to survive, not to become you. Voss stood and gave a formal military salute which Porter returned from his bed. As the reptilian general turned to leave, Porter called after him. Voss, teach your students one more thing. Teach them that peace is not the absence of conflict. It is the presence of systems that resolve conflict without war. We gave you the peace. You have to maintain it. We will, Voss promised. Or the next generation will. They are better than we were. On Luminar Commonwealth worlds, Lux had become a famous artist. Her work combined crystalline light sculpting with human emotional concepts, creating pieces that resonated with both species. Her latest installation was being unveiled at the Museum of Reconciliation on Earth, a structure built to commemorate the war and the peace that followed. The piece was called Refraction. It consisted of a central human form surrounded by crystalline structures representing the 5 coalition species. Light passed through the human figure and was split into 5 distinct beams, each illuminating one of the alien forms. But the alien forms themselves were positioned to reflect the light back toward the center, creating a complex pattern where each species illuminated all the others. Lux stood before the assembled crowd of dignitaries from all 6 species and explained her work. For years, I could not understand why humans fought the way they did. You had the power to destroy us completely, but you chose not to. You occupied our worlds but did not enslave our people. You forced us to change but did not erase our cultures. I thought these were contradictions. She manipulated the light controls, causing the sculpture to shift its patterns. Then I understood. Humans did not fight to destroy us. They fought to transform us into something that could coexist with them. They broke the light of the coalition into separate beams, reformed each one, and reflected it back into a unified pattern. We are not what we were, but we are not human either. We are something new. The sculpture completed its cycle, all 6 forms glowing in harmony. The audience sat in silence, contemplating the message. Then applause began, slowly at first, then building until representatives from all species stood in acknowledgement of the truth Lux had captured in light. Ambassador David Ross attended the unveiling. He was older now, gray-haired and tired from years of diplomatic service. After the ceremony, he spoke with reporters about the official end of the occupation. One journalist asked if humanity regretted the harshness of its initial response. We regret that it was necessary, David replied. We do not regret the decision itself. If you attack someone with intent to commit genocide, you cannot complain when they respond with overwhelming force. What matters is what happens after the fighting stops. We chose education over execution, reconstruction over revenge, transformation over termination. History will judge whether we chose correctly. What will you do when the occupation officially ends? Another reporter asked. Go home, David said simply. Watch from a distance. Hope that the systems we built hold, and pray that nobody ever again mistakes human restraint for human weakness, because we will not give a third chance. The museum later that evening was quiet. Lux stood alone before her sculpture, watching the light patterns cycle through their programmed sequence. A young human child approached, maybe 7 years old, clutching her mother's hand. Why are there 6 colors? The child asked. Lux knelt down to the child's level, her crystalline body pulsing with gentle warmth. Because 6 species learned to share the light. It took a war to teach us, but we learned. Will there be more wars? Lux looked at the child's mother, then back to the girl. I hope not, but if there are, I hope we remember what this war taught us. That strength without wisdom is destruction, but wisdom without strength is vulnerability. Your people showed us both. We are trying to learn. The child nodded solemnly, not fully understanding, but sensing the importance of the words. She and her mother moved on to other exhibits. Lux remained, watching the light pattern she had created, wondering if the piece they represented would survive the generation that created it. She hoped it would, but she had learned from humans that hope alone was never enough. You had to build systems, maintain vigilance, and never assume that peace was permanent. The sculpture's light would shine for centuries. Whether the peace it symbolized would last as long depended on choices not yet made by people not yet born. That uncertainty, Lux had learned, was the price of freedom. It was also its greatest strength. The emergency alert reached all 6 species simultaneously. Unknown vessels had entered charted space from beyond the galactic rim, a region previously thought to be uninhabited. The ships were massive, their technology unlike anything in the database of any known civilization. They had attacked a border colony without warning or communication, destroying the settlement completely before moving on to the next target. The colony had been populated by mixed-species citizens, both human and former coalition members living together. Former Admiral Rebecca Hayes received the call at her retirement home. She was 78 years old and had not worn a uniform in 3 years. The voice on the communicator was familiar. Admiral, this is command. We need you back. I am retired, Rebecca said automatically, but she was already moving toward her closet where her uniform still hung, cleaned and pressed out of habit. The new threat has hit 4 colonies in 6 days, all mixed population. The council representatives are in emergency session. They are asking for you specifically. Rebecca arrived at the new Galactic Council building within hours. The structure was different from the old one, designed to represent all 6 species equally. Human, Hive Collective, Luminar, Scale Authority, Tide Empire, and Sky Dominion representatives sat together without barriers, a change that would have been unthinkable 20 years ago. The meeting began with tactical briefings. The unknown species used weapons that burned through standard shielding like it did not exist. Their ships moved faster than anything in the current fleet inventories. Their tactics suggested a sophisticated military doctrine focused on shock and overwhelming force. They had sent no messages, no demands, no explanation. They simply appeared, destroyed, and moved on. Curix was present, allowed to attend as a historical observer, though he held no official position. The former Hive Collective leader listened to the briefings and finally spoke. This is what we looked like to you, is it not? An overwhelming threat appearing without warning, targeting colonies, showing no mercy. Rebecca met his compound eyes directly. Yes, exactly like that. Then you know what must be done. I know what we will do, Rebecca corrected, what we do together. The Council voted unanimously to activate mutual defense protocols established during the transition years. Human military advisors began coordinating with coalition defense forces immediately. The training they had provided during the occupation, The systems they had built, the doctrine they had shared, all of it was about to be tested. Fleet formations assembled at designated rally points. Human carriers launched alongside Hive collective swarm ships. Scale Authority ground forces boarded human transport vessels. Luminar intelligence networks integrated with human surveillance systems. Tide Empire submarines prepared to deploy from human assault ships. Sky Dominion fighters trained with human pilots in combined wing formations. Captain Daniel Foster, now a Commodore, commanded a task force that included ships from all 6 species. His flagship was human, but his tactical officers represented every major civilization. They gathered in the bridge to plan their response to the invasion. The enemy focuses on border colonies, the Luminar intelligence officer Prisma reported. She was the daughter of the former leader who had cooperated during the occupation. They test our defenses, measure our response times, and probably gather data for larger operations. Classic invasion pattern, Foster agreed, which means they will commit heavier forces once they determine we are weak enough to attack seriously. Are we weak enough? Asked Voss, the reptilian officer who had once defended Sarn against human invasion and now served as Foster's ground warfare specialist. That depends on whether we learned what the occupation was supposed to teach us, Foster replied. The humans won because we fought as one unified force with clear doctrine and shared purpose. If we fight as 6 separate militaries trying to coordinate, we will lose. If we fight as one military with 6 different strengths, we can win. The first major engagement happened at the border system of Threshold. The unknown enemy committed a fleet of 30 capital ships supported by hundreds of smaller craft. They expected to find divided resistance from species still learning to work together. Instead, they encountered a combined battle group that fought with practiced coordination. Human carriers used their superior engines to establish distance while deploying fighters. Hive collective swarm ships overwhelmed enemy point defenses with sheer numbers. Luminar vessels provided targeting data through their quantum communication networks. Scale Authority cruisers anchored the battle line with their heavy armor. Tide Empire ships disabled enemy vessels with electromagnetic pulse weapons. Sky Dominion craft executed high-speed attack runs that the enemy could not track effectively. The battle lasted 11 hours. When it ended, the unknown invaders retreated with heavy losses. They had expected easy victories against primitives. They found a unified civilization that combined the strengths of 6 species into a military force that operated as one organism. Oros, now serving as an ambassador, watched the battle reports with Buzz, his friend from the occupation years. Both were old now, their bodies showing the wear of long lives, but their minds were sharp, and they understood what they were seeing. They made the same mistake our leaders made, Oros said quietly. They saw our differences and assumed we were weak. The humans taught us that differences can be strengths if you organize them correctly, Buzz replied. We are individuals working together like my people learned. We are separate species cooperating like all of us learned. Do you think we would have figured this out without the occupation? Buzz's antennae twitched thoughtfully. No, we would still be 5 separate powers, each afraid of the others, each trying to dominate. The humans forced us to become something better by refusing to let us destroy them. The war with the unknown invaders lasted 2 years. In the end, the combined fleet drove them back beyond the rim. The enemy never attempted diplomacy. They never explained their motives. They simply learned that the galaxy they had tried to invade was defended by a civilization that had already learned the hard way how to combine different strengths into unified purpose. 50 years after the war, Amy Chen attended the dedication of a new monument. She was elderly but still sharp, accompanied by Buzz's daughter since Buzz himself had passed away 3 years earlier. The monument stood on the site where the first combined fleet had formed, a massive structure representing all 6 species standing together. A young student approached Amy after the ceremony. The student was reptilian, maybe 12 years old, wearing a school uniform that proudly displayed the symbol of the unified civilizations. "Excuse me, Elder. Our teacher said you knew people who lived through the occupation. What was it like?" Amy smiled at the child's innocent question. "It was hard. Humans occupied our worlds and forced us to change. Many people were angry, many were afraid, but they also taught us something important." "What did they teach you?" "That survival sometimes requires uncomfortable truths. The Coalition tried to destroy humanity because they feared us. The humans defeated us and then taught us why we should have been friends instead of enemies. They could have destroyed us. They chose to change us instead. That choice made the galaxy you live in possible." The young reptilian thought about that. "My teacher says the occupation was harsh but necessary. Do you agree?" Amy looked at the monument at the symbols of 6 species standing united. "I agree that it was necessary. Whether it was harsh depends on your perspective. Compared to what humans could have done, it was mercy. Compared to what we thought we deserved, it was justice. History will judge. But we are alive, we are free, and we are together. Those facts speak for themselves." The child thanked her and ran off to join classmates. Amy watched the young ones play, a mixed group of species chasing each other through the monument grounds without a thought to what species each other belonged to. They had been born into a galaxy where cooperation was normal, where different species worked together as naturally as breathing, where the idea of trying to exterminate a neighboring civilization seemed insane. That galaxy had been built on the foundation of retribution. Humanity had been attacked and had responded with overwhelming force. But instead of building an empire on the ruins of their enemies, they had built a civilization that included those enemies as partners. The occupation had been the bridge between war and peace, uncomfortable and necessary, neither entirely just nor entirely unjust. Amy thought about all the people she had known who never lived to see this day. The human colonists killed in the initial attacks, the soldiers who died in the fighting, the civilians caught in the crossfire, the former leaders executed for war crimes. General Porter, Rebecca Hayes, David Ross, and so many others who had worked to build peace from the ashes of war. Was it worth it? She asked herself quietly. She looked at the children playing. She thought about the unified fleet that had defended all 6 species against the invaders. She remembered Buzz and their conversations about individuality and cooperation. She considered what the galaxy would have been if the Coalition had succeeded in exterminating humanity, or if humanity had responded with pure vengeance instead of strategic justice. Yes, she said to herself, it was worth it. The monument's inscription agreed. 6 languages stated the same simple truth. They attacked us seeking conquest. We defeated them seeking survival. Together we built what neither could have achieved alone. May our children remember why we fought and why we chose peace. The sun set on the monument grounds. The children went home with their families. The unified civilization continued its work across hundreds of worlds. And somewhere in the archives, carefully preserved, were the records of how it had all begun with a council that feared humanity and a species that chose retribution over extinction, but taught lessons instead of destroying their enemies. It was not a perfect peace, but it was a lasting one, and in the end that was all that history demanded.